All right. Another video I'm excited to make. Today we're going to talk about triads. So let's jump right in. First things first, what's the difference between a triad and a trichord? So I was about to say seventh chord, but that would be erroneous. Seventh chords have four notes. That's already a difference. But a triad is a three-note chord, and remember that chord means a collection of notes. But a trichord is a more generic idea. A trichord are any three notes, right? Three chord, trichord. A triad, however, are three notes organized by skip, or what might be called also stacked thirds. So let's jump in. Otherwise, it's just all verbal. I'm just talking. So let's start with a diatonic scale. Let's keep it simple. So how about we let's do bass clef. So here's bass clef or F clef, and I'm going to draw the C Ionian, or more generically, the C major scale. Here's C Ionian, and I'm going to start right here on C3 and just go up the scale. Just as I draw this, remember that the first rule of writing a diatonic scale is not to talk about diatonic scales. No, that's not that joke loses its, I guess it loses its weight with every passing year. That was a Fight Club reference. But really, the first rule of writing diatonic scales is to move by step through the octave, and then the derivative of that same rule is no letter name repetition inside of the octave. Otherwise, you produce unisons, and we can only have steps in this scale. So here is the C Ionian scale. The next thing we're going to do is assign each one of these letters scale degrees. So C3 is scale degree number 1, scale degree 2. And as I write these, I wonder if you remember from other videos or just your own knowledge what these scale degrees are called. So scale degree 1 is the tonic. Scale degree 2 is the supertonic. Scale degree 3 is the mediant. 4 is the subdominant. 5 is the dominant. 6 is the submediant. 7 in this particular case is the leading tone because it's a minor second below the tonic. Otherwise, if it were a major second below in 5 of the modes. So Ionian and Lydian are the only two modes with leading tones. Everything else is a subtonic if it's a major second below the tonic. But anyway, so here we go. Here is the C Ionian scale with all the scale degrees. Starting from C3, it sounds like this. And what we're going to do is stack some thirds or create some triads on top of each one of these scale degrees, and because they're going to be sort of the fundamental note of each one of these triads, I don't mean fundamental in the sense of overtone series, but just the lower note, the lowest note in a series of stacked thirds. Each one of these scale degrees is going to be called the root of the triad, or the triadic root. So let's start with C. If I skip up from C, I'll land on E, and then if I skip up again, I'll land on G. And that is a triad. As you can see, a group of notes related to one another by skip. Also, the lower note, as we referenced, or as I just said, I don't know who the we are, is called the root. The middle note, because it's a skip above the root, or in other words, a third above the root, is called the third. And then the upper note, because it's a fifth above the root, is called the fifth. Okay, so those are the components, the elements of a triad, the root, the third, and the fifth. Let's go a bit further. Let's take a look at those intervals, sort of blow them up down here. So again, bass clef. So if we go from C up to E, we know that that interval is not just a third, but more specifically qualified as a major third. Sounds like this. And the reason you know it's a major third is because, number one, the size is 3, and the second component, the quality, there are 4 semitones from C up to E, as in 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's what qualifies this as major. Then the second component is the interval from the third, E, to the fifth, G, and that interval from E up to G is a minor third. And we know that because there are 3 semitones from E up to G. That's E and G. 1, 2, 3. And you put them together, and you have what's called a major triad. Why is it called a major triad? Specifically because of this arrangement of thirds. That is, from C up to E a major third, and then E up to G a minor third. So a major third below a minor third, tells us that this is a major triad. Okay? There's another component that almost goes without saying, but we might as well just make a note of it, no pun intended, and that is the interval from the root up to the fifth is a perfect fifth in this particular case, because C up to G, for example, in the C Ionian scale, C up to G, tonic up to dominant, is a perfect fifth because it has 7 semitones. So here's C, here's G, perfect fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 semitones. Okay, so the C major triad built on scale degree 1 of the C Ionian scale. If we do this for every single scale degree, we'll notice that some of the triads are major, some are minor, and there's one that's diminished. Let's talk about that. So let's go to scale degree 2, and we build the triad by stacking thirds from D, the root, up to F, the third, and up to A, the fifth, so DFA. If I play for you DFA, it doesn't quite sound like the C major triad, does it? Right, so this D triad, let's take a look for a second at how it's built. So D up to F is a minor third because it has 3 semitones. And then F up to A is a major third. And of course, D up to A is a perfect fifth. So this, because it's a minor third below a major third, that is minor third from root to third and major third from root to fifth, this is called a minor triad. All right, so let's take a look at the other ones. So if we go to scale degree 3, we build E up to G up to B. E to G is a minor third. G to B is a major third. And if you listen to it, here's EGB. It sounds a lot like a minor triad, and that's exactly what it is. So looking at what we've done so far, the quality of triad built from scale degree 1 in an Ionian scale, or in this case the C Ionian scale, is a major triad. Scale degrees 2 and 3 produce minor triads. What about scale degree 4? Well, let's see. F is the root, A is the third, and C is the fifth. F up to A is a major third, A up to C is a minor third, therefore this is a major triad. Sounds like this. Right, so the first 4 kind of just running in parallel. C major, D minor, E minor, F major. What if we start from G? Well, let's see, G up to B, major third, B up to D, minor third. Therefore, this is a major triad built on scale degree 5, or the dominant. Let's go up to A. A is the root, C is the third, and E is the fifth. A up to C is a minor third, C up to E is a major third. Therefore, this is a minor triad, and we only have one left because obviously all the way at the top, C4 is just a repetition of our tonic all the way at the bottom. So one more chord left, or trichord generally, or triad more specifically, and that is the one rooted on B. So if we just skip from B up to D, and then from D up to F, B up to D is a minor third, and D up to F is another minor third. So this one is unlike the others in that it produces a diminished triad. So let's take a look at this one in a bit more detail. So if we start on B, let's say we go over here to B2. Right, so B2 up to D is a minor third, and D up to F is another minor third. And then, unlike all of the preceding 6 triads, where the interval from the root to the fifth is a perfect fifth, this one is a diminished fifth, right? So from B up to F. Remember, that's also, by the way, the interval of the fifth in the Locrian or Locrian mode from tonic to dominant, B up to F. There's that diminished fifth, and here's the triad. And that's called the diminished triad. So we can write DIM for diminished, or another way to indicate that is with a little circle like that, that's usually presented as a superscript. Well, more on that later. So here are the 7 types of triads in every diatonic scale. Why do I know it's every one as opposed to just the Ionian mode? Well, because remember that all of the natural modes, for instance, are the same 7 letters, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, just starting from different notes. So the tonic is always different. So for the Ionian mode, the tonic is C. That's if I'm only using the 7 naturals. The Dorian mode, the tonic is D. That's D. The Phrygian mode, the tonic is E. The Lydian mode, the tonic is F. For the Mixolydian mode, the tonic is G. The Aeolian mode, the tonic is A. And finally, for the Locrian mode, the tonic is B. And since we're coming full circle, might as well play the Ionian mode on C. And there it is, C Ionian. So you'll notice that because these are the same 7 letters just rotated for each individual mode, it would stand to reason that every one of the triads built within have to be the same. That is, if we build from C, it's major. From F, it's major. From G, it's major, those triads, right? And then there are going to be 3 minors from D, rooted on D, E, and A. And finally, the one on B is going to be diminished. Now, that's not to say that they will be the same roots if we transpose within any given mode. So, for example, on the circle of fifths, if we're in Ionian mode and we look at the scale with 4 sharps, that would be E Ionian, right? So, of course, there, the second scale degree is F sharp, and you will build an F sharp minor triad because in all modes, the qualities depend on the position of the note relative to the tonic. So that's a very verbose way of saying, in Ionian mode, all triads built from whatever the actual tonic is for Ionian mode, all triads built from scale degrees 1, 4, and 5 are major. From 2, 3, and 6 are minor. And from 7, the leading tone, you'll be diminished. Okay? So that's how you understand triads, including the components of each triad, the root, the third, and the fifth. Now let's take a look at something known as inversions. So just kind of sliding on over. Let's say that we take the, again, we're in C. So let's say the C Ionian scale. Let's say we take that, so here's bass clef, and we take C, E, and G. In this configuration where the root is in the bass means on the bottom. This is what's called root position. And I want you to notice that in root position, the intervals above the root are as follows, starting from the largest down. C up to G is 5, right? We don't have to qualify this. We know it's a perfect fifth. And then C up to E is 3. So what's called the figure, that is the numerical representation of the intervals above the bass note. In this case, it's the root, right? Bass just means lowest. So here, for root position, the figured bass is 5, 3, or just the figures. Let's say we rotate this chord, meaning we move the root elsewhere, so that the bass will now be the third. So E, and then let's keep it in close position, meaning all of the notes are within 1 octave. So E, G, and all the way up to C. See how the root is on top? So now we have the third of the chord on the bottom and then the fifth above, which is G. Not the interval of the fifth, but the fifth of the triad above that, G, and then the root above that. Notice that this is called first inversion, right? Where we took the root C and moved it up an octave. Here, the figures from the bass, which is the third of the triad, E up to C, 6, and E up to G, 3. So the figured bass, or just the figures for first inversion, are 6, 3. Let's continue. Now let's move to what's called second inversion. So in this case, we're going to have the fifth of the chord in the bass on the bottom, and then we're going to keep everything in close position. So all the letters, all the pitches within 1 octave. So then C above that and E above that. And this is called second inversion. And in second inversion, the figures are from the bass, right, which is the fifth of the chord. G up to E is 6, and G up to C is 4. So this is called 6/4 inversion. Or in other words, the figures, again, figures just mean the intervals just expressed as sizes above the given bass, or the lowest note. So if we rotate this triad one more time, you'll see that C, the root, comes back into bass position. So That just means that there are only 2 inversions for every single triad, right? In other words, the number of elements minus 1. 3 elements minus 1. That's it. Okay, so this represents the inversions and the root position and the figures for every single triad. Right? Pretty straightforward. Now, let's see what happens if we have minor modes. Okay, so on a different screen, let's go over to a tonal transposition of C Ionian, and let's do this for A Aeolian. Oh, wrong way. That was another lesson. Sneak preview of that one, I suppose. All right, so let's keep it in bass clef. So let's go over here, and let's draw the scale for A Aeolian. Okay, so remember, this is the natural mode starting on A, so I start right here with A2, and I'm just going to go up by step through the octave. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. All right, and again, just drawing in the scale degrees. 1, 2, 3 mediant, 4 subdominant, 5 dominant, 6 submediant, 7 in this case, notice, is a major second away from A. G is a major second below A, therefore it's the subtonic, and then back to our tonic. And that is the A Aeolian mode. Similarly, I can build my triad starting from A. So A, C, E, D, B, D, F, E. What am I talking about? Man, I'm off today. A, C, E, B, D, F, C, E, G, D, F, and A, E, G, B, F, A, C, G, B, D, and finally, of course, we're back to our tonic. So these are the 7 chords. Now, just like on the previous slide, any chord, as long as we're using just naturals, the C chord is going to be major, right? So here's C major. The F chord is going to be major. Here's the F major triad. Here's the G major triad, also major. Remember that then there are going to be several minors, right? So going back, A is going to be minor. B, remember, is going to be diminished. Remember, that's also that circle. And then D is going to be minor, and E is going to be minor. So we have the 3 minors, the 3 majors, and the 1 diminished. Now, they are in a different order than they were starting from the C scale because we have the same 7 notes but rotated to begin on the tonic A as opposed to the tonic C. But you'll notice that these are the same 3 major, 3 minor, and 1 diminished. Now, with minor modes, we get the addition of one little point that is important, which is we need to apply something known as harmonic minor. Now, for harmonic minor, remember that what that means is you raise scale degree 7. This is really a concept known as modal mixture. In modal mixture, you're borrowing accidentals or just other pitches from a parallel mode. In common practice music, most of the time that means borrowing notes from the parallel major mode if you're starting in minor, or vice versa. If you're starting in major, borrowing from parallel minor. So what that would look like is, let's here on the bottom, draw the A Ionian scale. Okay? Now remember, on the circle of fifths, that's at position 3 clockwise, meaning it has 3 sharps. In fact, here I can probably use that screen I flashed earlier. Here's the circle of fifths from a different lesson. Notice that A is right there at position 3 clockwise, so it has 3 sharps. The order of sharps is right there, and the first 3 sharps are F, C, and G. So all the remaining 4 letters are going to be naturals. So going back here, that would mean that if I draw the A Ionian scale, here's A. So the first thing is just draw through all the letters that we need, and then apply the requisite accidentals. So in this case, the 3 sharps starting with F, F sharp, then C sharp, then G sharp. And those are my accidentals for the A Ionian scale. So let's play these two and compare them. So here's A minor, or A Aeolian. And here's A Ionian, or A major. Remember that major and minor is a very generic distinction. It just means the interval of the tonic up to the mediant. So if it's minor, it's a minor mode. If it's major, then it's a major mode. So here's the A Ionian scale. All right, Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply what I was talking about earlier, which is harmonic minor. So we're going to go back to A Aeolian, and we're going to raise scale degree 7. Okay, so scale degree 7, and we're only going to raise it, incidentally, in the upper tetrachord. Okay, that's just generally how it operates. So remember, what you do for the tetrachords is you split the scale into 2 halves, right? So the lower tetrachord are scale degrees 1 through 4, and the upper tetrachord are scale degrees 5 through 1. So looking inside of the upper tetrachord, I'm going to find scale degree 7. Scale degree 7 in the natural minor, meaning I have not altered it in any way, it's just these 7 letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, is the note G. So I'm going to find G and I'm going to raise it. That's what harmonic minor requires. So let's start with, for example, the chord built from scale degree 5. Okay, so here the notes are E, G, B. Well, I'm going to raise that G to a G sharp, and where, again, this is the point I was making earlier, where did that G sharp come from? It's being borrowed from the G sharp, which is the leading tone, scale degree 7, in A Ionian. So I'm just sort of lifting it from Ionian and placing it right there inside of Aeolian. And the other scale degree, of course, is the root, as opposed to the third in the 5 chord here. It's the root of the scale of the chord built from scale degree 7. So here it is, G sharp. Okay, and again, that G sharp similarly has been borrowed or mixed from the A Ionian scale. So these are the 2 chords that get this alteration, right? It's a result of something known, I'm just reviewing, as modal mixture or modal borrowing. That is, I'm getting the G sharp from the parallel A major, or more specifically, A Ionian mode. Okay, so what is the result of this mixture? Well, now let's take a look at the chord built from scale degree 5. Remember, that's the dominant scale degree, and so we can name this triad in relation to its root. It's the E chord. In this case, it can also be called the dominant triad, and let's take a look at its quality. You'll notice that it is no longer minor. It was E, G, B, but now let's make it E, G sharp B. So it went from being minor to major, right? Because E to G sharp is a major third and G sharp to B is a minor third, okay? And then let's take a look at the consequences of taking that 7 chord, the one built from scale degree 7, which had been the subtonic when it was G natural. Now that it's G sharp, we go from G, B, D, which was major, to G sharp, B, D, which is now diminished because G sharp to B is a minor third and B to D is another minor third. So this has become a diminished triad. Okay? You'll notice that the chord built on scale degree 5 and the chord built on scale degree 7, the dominant and the leading tone triads respectively, are the same as they would be in the parallel Ionian mode. That is, if we build a dominant triad in A major, A Ionian, it's going to be E, G sharp, and B, right? That's a major triad. And then if we build one from scale degree 7, the leading tone, it's going to be G sharp, B, and D, and that's also diminished, right? And if you go back to the previous screen when we were talking about Ionian, notice that on scale degree 5, the chord has a quality of major, and on scale degree 7, the chord has a quality of diminished, which of course is not any different in A Ionian, right? It's just a real transposition of C Ionian, but now we've mixed in that raised 7, the leading tone, into A Aeolian, and scale degrees 5 and scale degrees 7 as roots now have major and diminished chords respectively, just like their parallel counterpart, right, starting on A. So this is important to keep in mind because we have these alterations in the minor mode that can be applied and often are applied in real music. And that's why this is called harmonic minor, because the harmonic minor is a change that's done through modal mixture in a harmonic context, as opposed to melodic minor, which is often a melodic context. But that's not applicable for this particular discussion. So we're going to keep it here. So now let's take a look at what happens if we invert some of these triads, okay? So we're going to go one step further. We talked about the inversion, but now I want to add what's known as a Roman numeral analysis. So here's what this means, right? So it doesn't really matter which scale we use, but let's continue with that Aeolian mode, all right? So I want to take the tonic triad, the one built from A. So ACE, right? We're still using bass clef, okay? So here's A, C, and E. Now you'll notice that this configuration where all the thirds are as close to one another as they can be, just stacked one on top of the other, A to C, C to E, this is a root position triad. And the way I'm going to indicate this using Roman numeral analysis is I'm going to take the root of the chord, which remember is scale degree 1, and the quality of the chord, which here is minor, and I'm going to kind of synthesize these two pieces of information into a lowercase Roman numeral representing number 1, which is the letter I. So this letter I means the root of the chord is scale degree 1, and because it's lowercase, it's minor. If it were uppercase, it would be major. Okay? Now I'm going to add to this the figures that we talked about before, if you recall. So the figures for all root position are the intervals from root up to 5th and root up to 3rd, so 5 and 3. So this is a 1, 5, 3. Okay, now what happens if I invert it? Well, remember that now, instead of the root in the bass, I'm going to have the third in the bass. So C up to E up to A. The root hasn't changed. The root is still A, it's just in a different location in the texture. So this is still a minor triad, so the Roman numeral is still lowercase I, or lowercase 1, but the figures are different for first inversion. As you recall from the previous screen, C up to A, the third up to the root, is 6, and C up to E is 3. So this is a 1, 6, 3, right? That means first inversion, as opposed to 5, 3, which is root position. Let's invert it one more time for second inversion, meaning the fifth of the triad, E is in the bass. So E, then up to A, and then C. And so has the root changed? Same root, it's still A. So we're going to keep that lowercase I, because it's still an A minor triad, no matter what you do, no matter what kind of rotation or inversion you apply. But what has changed are the figures. So E up to C is 6, and E up to A is 4. So this is a second inversion 6-4 triad, and it's still 1 because that's contextual, right? The 1 relates to the root in its position in the scale relative to the tonic. The root is the tonic in this case, so this is the 1 chord. What if we were to do this with the 2 chord, which remember the 2 chord over here is B diminished, B to F. So before we do that, let's just hear the sounds of these triads. So ACE, root position, 1, 5, 3. First inversion, 1, 6, 3. And second inversion, second inversion. All right, let's do that with a couple more chords, and then we'll apply the harmonic minor, and we'll be done with our lesson. So let's take a look at the 2 chord. Now the 2 chord in A minor, or A Aeolian, is, as you know, diminished. So the way you indicate that is you write lowercase 2 because it's diminished with a circle. And that circle, remember, means diminished, as we demonstrated over here, as you can see on the left side of the screen. So the chord is B, D, and F. That is root position. So what you do here is with root position, you indicate 5, 3. For first inversion, you move the third into the bass, just meaning the bottom, so D, F, and then the B is on top. So this is a 2 diminished 6, 3, right? And finally, for second inversion, the fifth is in the bass, so that's B. B's moved to the top, so it's F on the bottom, then B on top of that, and then D on top of that, and that's going to be a 2 diminished 6, 4. Okay, because these figures 5, 3, 6, 3, 6, 4 just indicate the interval sizes above the given bass, the lowest note in the texture. Okay, that's it. Now before we continue with anything, it's important to note, again no pun intended, that all of these figures are not required in music analysis and music theory analysis. Some of them can be omitted, or they're just understood, they're implied. So I'm going to put parentheses around the figures that are implied. In root position, both 5 and 3 are implied. So if you just write 2 diminished, this implies that it's in root position. For the first inversion, the 3 is not necessary, it's implied. So if I just write 2 diminished 6, that's understood as first inversion. Now for second inversion, that's not the case. Both figures are necessary, because if I leave out the 4, then I'm just left with 2 diminished 6. Well, that just looks like first inversion. That would be confusing. If I leave out the 6 and just write 4, that might be confusing because the 4 in other contexts may have a different definition, a different connotation. So it may be a part of a suspension figure, it may be a 7th chord. There are a host of reasons why you don't want to leave any of these figures out in second inversion. So for second inversion, you need both 2 diminished, 6, 4. All right. Well, let's continue and talk about harmonic minor. So let's take a look at, for example, the dominant chord once it's been mixed from the parallel major, from the parallel Ionian. So in this case, that would be the E major triad. So let's write it out. E, G sharp. Remember, that's that 7th scale degree raised, the subtonic becoming the leading tone. So here we have E, G sharp, and B. All right. So we know that the root is scale degree 5. We also know that the quality of the chord is major. Therefore, we're going to write an uppercase Roman numeral 5. Okay? And remember, this is root position, so it's 5-3, but the 5-3 is implied, so I don't have to write anything. If we move this into first inversion, the G sharp is in the bass, up to B, and then up to E. That's going to be a 5-6, as opposed to 6-3, because the 3 is implied. Finally, we also can move this into second inversion, which is B, E, and then one more ledger line above that is G sharp, and that's going to be a 5 in second inversion, which is 6-4. And that's it, okay? So the other thing to note is sometimes you need to indicate using figures that there has been this alteration, right? That is, we've been mixing or applying harmonic minor, mixing from the parallel major. And the way to do that is by having sometimes what's known as a slash through the figure. So for example, if I were to write the following, so take a look at this chord right there, okay? This second inversion E major chord. If I put a slash through the 6, that slash means raise the 6th above the given bass note. Okay, so let's say that I apply this to another chord. Let's think. So let's go down here, maybe bass clef again, and let's say that we're dealing with the diminished triad built from the raised leading tone. So let's say I have a leading tone chord. In this case, we're in the key of A, so that would be the G sharp. Here you can come over here and take a look. On the left side of the screen, that's the G sharp diminished triad. So let's say I have the following figures. So I have my 7 chord. So it's going to be, because it's diminished, it's going to be lowercase. So there's my lowercase 7, plus we need the diminished symbol. And now let's say I indicate a 6 with a slash through it. So what this means is this is a 7 chord. The root in the, well, because I know what key I'm in, right? So I'm in the key of A, right? So I indicate that there. And I know that if it says 6, it's first inversion, which means the 3rd is in the bass. The 3rd of my G sharp diminished triad is B. So let's put B in the bass, and then we have to write the remaining elements of the chord above it. So G sharp is the root, B is the 3rd already given in the bass, and then D is the 5th. So I'm going to put the D above that and the G sharp above that. But notice that I don't know necessarily that it's going to be G sharp, but the slash through the 6, the figure tells me, oh, find the 6th above the root, not the root, sorry, find the 6th above the bass and raise it. G is a 6th above B. I'm going to raise it, I'm going to sharpen it, and there it is. Is this in fact a G sharp diminished chord over B, or G sharp with B in the bass? It is. It sounds like this. Right? And that is my diminished triad built on G sharp in first inversion. Okay, so there's one more. What if I do, What if we try a different chord? Let's say we try a chord like the dominant chord. Let's go back there. And let's say that you just see this, 5, and then you see a sharp. This sharp means raise the third above the given bass. So this indicates, notice that there are no figures. That means we're in root position, 5-3. Those are implied. So since I'm in the key of A, Aeolian or A minor, E is going to be my root. The third above E is G. Don't forget to raise it. G sharp, that's that raised 7th. That's part of harmonic minor. And then B is the 5th, and I'm done. Okay? So let's put it kind of all together as we wrap up this particular lesson. So let's choose, I don't know, how about we choose a different scale? So we've done C Ionian, we've done A Aeolian. Let's do something like, I don't know, how about F? Right, so let's use treble clef, why not? We've been using bass clef throughout. So F Ionian. Okay, so F Ionian starts on F right there, and we're going to go up the scale. F, G, A, don't forget the 1 flat, that's part of F Ionian, B flat, C, D, E, and then of course back to our tonic F. We're going to build all the triads above, so F, A, C, G, B flat, don't forget that very important accidental B flat, that's for the supertonic chord, A, C, E for the mediant, B flat, D, F for the subdominant, C, E, G for the dominant, D, F, A for the submediant, and finally E, G, don't forget the B flat, for the leading tone chord. Now, the qualities are like in all of the Ionian mode, right? All the Ionian mode qualities. Everything built on scale degree 1 is major. Scale degree 4, B flat here is major. Scale degree 5, the dominant C is major. Scale degrees 2 and 3 are minor, as are 6, and 7 is diminished. All right, that we know. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just write down the Roman numerals, right? Because these are all currently in root position. So in the key of F, that's how you indicated, the key of F, the scale of F, and its subsequent triads. And later on we'll learn 7th chords. This is Roman numeral 1, lowercase 2 because it's minor, lowercase 3 because it's minor, uppercase 4, uppercase 5, the dominant, lowercase 6, the submediant, lowercase 7 plus the circle for diminished. And you'll notice that none of them have 5-3 because those are all implied figures. They're all in root position. All right? So one kind of quick thing that we can practice is, let's say that we don't have these close inversion chords, but rather we have something that's kind of spread out in open position. So again, treble clef, let's say we're still in the key of F, so I can even apply a key signature if I want. There it is for the B flat. And let's say I take the 2 chord, the supertonic triad, which as you can see right there is the G minor chord, right? G minor. And instead of writing it like this, G, B flat, and D, the B, by the way, that's implied as flat because I've already been given the key signature. Let's say I spread it out. So something like this, G, and then B flat all the way up there, and then let's say D in between. The difference between this close position, G minor, and the open position is that the texture is the same. It's 3 notes, but the spacing is quite different. Here, it's 5 and 3 above the given bass note, the root, and here it's going to be G up to B flat, which is 10, and then G up to D, which is 5. I don't like the way I drew that 5. Kind of messy, right? So let me just do that correctly. So 5. You'll notice that there are many ways of spacing out triads, and later on, of course, 7th chords, right? They can be very, very wide or very, very close, very, very open or very, very close. It is simpler to just maintain a similar way or just a simpler way, of simplified, a reduced way of indicating these figures. So all root positions are 5-3 regardless of spacing. Okay? It's just a simpler way of a system that otherwise has many, many ways and variations of configuring these notes. So all root position 5-3, all first inversion 6-3, or just 6, and all second inversion 6-4. All right, so for this, let's indicate Roman numeral 2, And for this, it's also Roman numeral 2. Nothing has changed, right? But what if it's in inversion? So what if, for example, instead of G in the bass, we're still dealing with this G minor triad, right? G minor. Let's say we have a first inversion. So like G, so that would be G over B flat, right? Here's the triad root, and here's the triad bass. Okay? That's called the lead or the chord symbol. Okay? So let's say we have G over B flat. So that just means that B flat's on the bottom. And then I can have any configuration above that. I can have G over here, D over here, G over here. It doesn't really matter, right? So how do we figure out what this chord is if we're just given these notes? Well, you have to get rid of anything that's doubled in terms of how you're labeling. So let's say you're writing these out and you start writing, okay, from the bass on up, B flat, then G, then D, then G. I'm going to cross out this G because I don't need it, not for my analytical purposes, and I have B flat, G, and D. Can those be rearranged into a series of stacked thirds? Yes, G, B, D, G, B flat, D. So G is the root, and if B flat, the third, is in the bass, then I know that this is going to be a first inversion triad. So again, I use the same Roman numeral relative to my key context of F, and I just write this is a 2 chord with first inversion, so that's 2, 6. What if it's second inversion? And we'll call it a day after that. So that would be G over D. Again, this is the triadic root, and this is what's in the bass. So it doesn't really matter how it's spelled out as long as D is on the bottom. And then we can have, I don't know, B flat, let's say here, and let's say we put the G there and the G there, and maybe we'll put another D over here. It doesn't really matter. You notice there are a number of doublings. We'll get rid of all those doublings in our analysis. So we'll read from the bass on up, right? So that would be D, G, B flat, D, and G. I'm going to get rid of everything that's doubled, and I notice that this is another G minor triad, G, B flat, D, when they're arranged from root up to third up to fifth, and the D is in the bass. So that means that this is a second inversion chord. So I write 2, again, that's the key context because G is scale degree 2 in the key of F, and then I write the requisite figures for second inversion, 2, 6, 4. All right, and that can look as written over there, or in a more simplified way, it can just look like this, D up to G, up to B flat. Remember, this is what's called open position because the notes spread out beyond an octave, and this is what's known as close position because all of the pitches of the triad are within 1 octave. So that's it. So practice this by working through different scales and understanding what the Roman numerals are, the application of harmonic minor to the dominant and the leading tone triads, and then the requisite inversions. And remember, 5-3 for root position, 6-3 for first inversion, and 6-4 for second inversion.